There is no noise in the courtroom, but it is not peaceful. It seems like something is going to blow up. Kody Brown sits still with his jaw clenched, and Christine across the room won't even look at him. And then Janelle talks. One line. One charge. And all of a sudden, everything this family tried to keep secret comes out. There has been tension for years, not just in the courtroom. We start with a memory. The camera of memory takes us back to a time when things were quieter and a family was pretending everything was fine. 4 wives. 1 spouse. To them, the structure looked strange, but it was meant to mean unity. But even then, something isn't right. Christine is smiling, but her eyes don't show it. Janelle doesn't say much, she mostly watches. Mary seems far away, as if she's already halfway out. And Robyn has Kody's full attention in a way that the others can't ignore. What about Kody? He thinks he can keep everything together. But in reality, he is losing control. The narration slows down here and becomes softer and more thoughtful. We see dinners where people laugh on purpose. When someone walks into the room, the conversation stops. Decisions are being made, but not in the same way. Christine starts to feel like no one can see her. Not unloved, just replaced. Janelle sees patterns. Changing how you make financial decisions. Changing of priorities. She doesn't face it yet, but she does see it. And Mary, she already feels like she's not a part of something she used to build. But no one says it out loud. Not yet. The tone is getting a little darker now. Then it's time to move. Coyote Pass. A choice that changes everything. Kody says it's a dream, a new beginning. But to the wives, it feels like a risk, one they didn't fully agree to. Money is getting tighter, the stress gets worse. And what about Robyn? It gets clearer, more powerful, not touchable. Christine begins to ask questions. Real ones. The kind that people don't ignore anymore. Why does it feel like we're not the same? Kody doesn't give a straight answer. He turns away, becomes defensive. And that's the first break. Janelle pays close attention to this. She's not as emotional as Christine, but she is logical. And something doesn't make sense. Where is the cash going? Why are people making decisions without everyone? Why does it seem like one family is more important than the others? Still, no one goes too far, because pushing means putting everything on the line. The memory fades and we are back in court. The present hurts more now. Christine sits up straight and has a serious look on her face. She is no longer upset. She has moved on from that. Janelle slowly flips through the papers. Well organized, ready. Mary doesn't look anyone in the eye. And Robyn looks scared. Not weak, but aware. Kody moves around in his chair, showing that he is uncomfortable. This is no longer a family talk. This is okay. This is exposure. The judge comes in, everyone gets up. And just like that, the past becomes proof. The first witness begins to speak. It's not very loud. It doesn't explode. It's under control. But it's risky. Because the truth is finally being told where it can't be ignored. The lawyer calls the first witness to the stand. Christine. She moves forward slowly. No second thoughts. No going back. Kody is looking at her, not angry yet, but not at ease. He knows deep down, she isn't here to fix anything. She is here to end it. Christine takes a breath, sits down, and looks straight ahead. And then she says something. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was control. The room stops moving. The judge even stops for a moment. Kody's face changes right away. That sentence changed the course of everything. Christine keeps going. She talks about not getting enough emotional support, being biased, being alone. But she doesn't yell. That's what makes it better. She is calm. Sure. Every word was weighed, but it was heavy. Kody's lawyer tries to stop him by objecting. But the judge says it's okay. This isn't a guess. This is what it's like. And things are about to get worse. Christine leans a little bit forward. Decisions were being made that affected all of us, but only one household benefited. And now, everyone looks away. To Robyn. The air changes right away. Robyn's breathing can be seen a little faster. Kody only looks at her for a second. That one look says it all. Janelle sees it and writes something down. Christine stops. The courtroom is quiet again. And then her lawyer asks her this. Do you think there was a difference in money between family members? Christine doesn't think twice. Yes. Kody lets out a sharp breath. And just like that, the case is no longer emotional. It's about money. It's okay. It's serious. And what about Janelle? Finally, she looks up. It's her turn soon, so now? And Janelle had proof, unlike Christine. The judge says to take a short break. Everyone gets up, but no one moves right away. Because something has changed. This isn't about relationships anymore. This is about being responsible. And as Kody walks by Janelle, she finally talks to him directly. In a quiet way. You should have told the truth. Kody stops. Just for a second. But he doesn't say anything. He keeps going. Because maybe he no longer has an answer. The mind's camera pulls back, the doors to the courtroom close, and in that room, things are about to get even worse. Because next, Janelle goes to the stand. And unlike Christine, she doesn't have any feelings. She comes with numbers, papers, proof, and a story that Kody can't talk his way out of. The courtroom feels different when everyone returns from recess, heavier somehow, like the air itself knows what's coming next. And this time when Janelle stands, there's no hesitation in her movement. No glance toward Kody, no searching for approval, just a quiet, controlled determination as she walks to the stand, sits down, and places a neatly organized folder in front of her. The kind of preparation that doesn't come from emotion, but from months, maybe years of silent observation. And Kody notices it immediately because this isn't the same dynamic he's used to. This isn't a conversation. He can redirect or diffuse. This is structured, documented, and dangerously precise. And when Janelle finally looks up, her expression is calm, almost detached. But there's something underneath it. Something unshakable, the kind of certainty that only comes when someone has already made peace with. The truth they're about to reveal, and her lawyer steps forward, voice steady, asking her to state her name, her role in the family, the basics, but everyone in the room already knows who she is. What matters is what she's about to say next, and when the questions shift toward finances, toward decision-making, toward the structure of the family's shared assets, Janelle doesn't rush. She answers slowly, clearly, every word deliberate, explaining how the family once operated as a collective, how money flowed into a shared pool, how decisions were supposed to be mutual, equal, balanced. But then her tone changes slightly. Not dramatic, just enough to signal a shift, and she says, "That's how it was supposed to work. But that's not how it ended," and there's a subtle reaction across the room. Christine lowers her gaze for a moment, Mary shifts uncomfortably, and Robyn's posture stiffens, while Kody leans back, arms crossing defensively as if bracing himself, and Janelle opens her folder, pulling out the first document, placing it on the table in front of her like a piece of evidence that's been waiting far too long to be seen, and her lawyer asks her to explain it, and she does, walking through numbers, transactions, timelines, not in a confusing way, but in a way that builds a picture, a pattern, something that becomes clearer with each sentence, and the courtroom listens because this isn't emotional testimony. This is factual, structured, undeniable, and she explains how certain financial decisions began shifting over time, how funds that were meant to support all households started being allocated differently, how investments were made that didn't benefit everyone equally, and she doesn't accuse directly. She doesn't raise her voice. She simply presents what happened, and somehow that makes it hit even harder, because there's no room to dismiss it as exaggeration or anger, and Kody's lawyer tries to interrupt, questioning the interpretation, suggesting that decisions were made collectively, that nothing was hidden. But Janelle doesn't react emotionally. She simply responds, "If it was collective, then why were some of us unaware?" And that question hangs in the air longer than expected, because it doesn't just challenge the lawyer, it challenges the entire narrative Kody has been holding on to, and for the first time, Kody shifts in his seat in a way that looks less defensive and more uneasy, like he's realizing this isn't something he can easily explain away. And Janelle continues, flipping to another document, another record, another detail that adds weight to the story she's building, and she begins to describe specific instances, moments where financial choices were made without full transparency, moments where the outcomes clearly favored one household over the others. And again, she doesn't say Robyn's name, but she doesn't have to, because everyone in the room already knows. And the silence that follows each statement is louder than any accusation could be, because sometimes the most powerful truth isn't shouted, it's laid out so clearly that no one can argue with it, and the lawyer asks her directly now, "Do you believe these decisions were intentional?" And for the first time, Janelle pauses, not because she's unsure, but because she understands the weight of what she's about to say, and when she answers, her voice is steady, but there's an edge to it now. Something sharper. "I believe they were choices, and those choices had consequences for all of us," and that word, choices, lands differently, because it removes any excuse of confusion or accident. It suggests awareness, responsibility, and Kody reacts immediately, leaning forward, shaking his head slightly, clearly wanting to speak, to interrupt, but he can't, not yet. And that lack of control only makes the tension worse for him, and Janelle continues, now explaining how those choices affected her personally. How she found herself questioning not just the finances, but the entire structure of the family. How trust began to erode slowly, not in one big moment, but in a series of small realizations that added up over time. And as she speaks, the courtroom feels less like a legal setting and more like a space where years of unspoken truth are finally being given a voice. And Christine watches her with a quiet understanding, as if hearing her own experiences echoed in a different form, while Mary looks down, her expression harder to read, caught somewhere between agreement and regret, and Robyn looks overwhelmed, her composure starting to crack just slightly, because even though nothing is being directly thrown at her, the implication is clear. And it's building with every passing second, and the lawyer presses further, asking Janelle if she ever confronted Kody about these concerns, and she nods, explaining that she did multiple times, that she tried to have conversations to understand, to find clarity, but those conversations often led nowhere, or worse, to deflection. And Kody's reaction to this is immediate, a quiet but visible frustration, as if he's hearing a version of events he doesn't agree with, but again, he can't interrupt, he can only sit there and listen, and that power shift is impossible to ignore. Because the moment someone who was once silent starts speaking with clarity, the entire balance changes, and Janelle leans back slightly now, her tone softening just a bit as she reflects, not just on the finances, but on what it all meant, how it changed the way she saw the family, how it made her question whether the principles they started with were ever truly being upheld. And for a brief moment, there's a hint of emotion, not overwhelming, not dramatic, just enough to remind everyone that behind the numbers and documents is a person who lived through all of it. And then the lawyer asks the question that shifts everything again. Do you believe there was favoritism within the family structure? And this time, there's no pause, no hesitation, just a simple, direct answer, yes, and that word hits just as hard as Christine's earlier statement. Because now it's not just one perspective, it's a pattern, a consistency, something that's becoming harder and harder to deny. And Kody finally reacts more visibly, shaking his head, whispering something under his breath, his frustration no longer contained, and Robyn looks at him, her expression a mix of concern and fear, as if realizing that this is spiraling in a way they didn't expect. And Janelle closes her folder slowly, signaling that she's said what she needed to say, but the impact of it lingers, heavy and unavoidable. And as the lawyer thanks her and steps back, the courtroom remains quiet for a moment longer, as if everyone is processing what just happened, because this wasn't just testimony. It was a dismantling of a narrative, piece by piece, detail by detail, and as Janelle steps down from the stand, she doesn't look at Kody, doesn't seek any reaction. She simply walks back to her seat with the same calm determination she had when she stood up, but the difference now is that the room has changed. The energy has shifted, the story has deepened, and the consequences of everything that's been said are just beginning to unfold. And when the truth starts forming a pattern instead of isolated moments, that's when it becomes impossible to ignore. And just as it feels like the tension might settle, the judge looks down at the file, then back up, and says something that immediately tightens the atmosphere again. The court will now hear testimony from Robyn, and for a split second, everything freezes. Because this is the moment no one is fully prepared for, and as Robyn slowly stands, her composure fragile but still holding, one question lingers in the air stronger than ever. What happens when the person at the center of it all finally has to speak? Robyn doesn't move right away when her name is called, and for a brief second it feels like time itself has slowed, like even the courtroom is holding its breath to see whether she will step forward or retreat. But then she rises, carefully, almost cautiously, smoothing her hands against her, dressed as if trying to steady herself, and every eye follows her as she walks to the stand, not with the quiet confidence Janelle carried, but with a visible weight pressing on her shoulders. And when she finally sits down, there's a flicker of vulnerability in her expression, something raw and unguarded, but also something else, something calculating, as if she's already deciding how much of the truth she's willing to share. And Kody watches her closely, his posture tense, his jaw set, like he's silently urging her to hold the line to protect what's left of their version of the story. And the lawyer approaches, voice calm but precise, starting with simple questions, easing into it, giving Robyn space to speak. And when she answers, her voice is soft, almost trembling at first, explaining her role in the family, how she came into it later than the others, how she tried to build relationships to find her place. And for a moment, the tone shifts, softer, more reflective, as if the courtroom is being invited to see her not as the center of controversy, but as someone who believes she was just trying to belong. And she talks about the early days, about feeling like an outsider, about wanting acceptance, and it almost works, almost pulls sympathy into the room. But then the questions begin to shift, slowly, carefully, toward the things that matter most, toward the decisions, the finances, the structure that Janelle just laid bare. And Robyn's posture changes, ever so slightly, her shoulders tightening, her hands clasping together more firmly. And when the lawyer asks her directly about the financial decisions that were made, she hesitates, just for a second, but it's enough for everyone to notice, enough to signal that this is where the story becomes complicated. And she begins to explain, choosing her words carefully, saying that she trusted Kody to handle those decisions, that she didn't always know the full details, that she believed everything was being done for the good of the family. And it's a defense, but it's not a strong one. It feels incomplete, like something is being left unsaid, and Janelle watches her closely, not with anger, but with a kind of quiet scrutiny, as if measuring every word against what she already knows. And Christine shifts slightly in her seat, her expression harder now, less patient, because she's heard this kind of explanation before, and it never quite answers the real question. Because when someone says they didn't know, it often raises more questions than it answers, and the lawyer doesn't let it settle, pressing further, asking Robyn if she benefited from any of these financial decisions. And the room tightens again, because this is the moment where implication turns into something more direct. and Robyn's eyes flick briefly toward Kody, just for a fraction of a second, but it's enough to be noticed. Enough to reveal that she's not entirely standing on her own here. And when she answers, her voice is steadier now, but there's a defensiveness to it. I didn't ask for anything that wasn't fair, and that word, fair, hangs in the air, heavy with interpretation. Because what's fair to one person doesn't always feel fair to another, and the lawyer follows up immediately, asking her to define what fair meant in this context, and that's where the cracks begin to show more clearly. Because Robyn struggles to give a direct answer, circling around the idea, talking about needs, about circumstances, about different situations requiring different decisions, and it's not wrong, but it's not clear either. And that lack of clarity becomes its own kind of answer, and Kody shifts again, more visibly now, his frustration building, because this isn't going the way he needs it to, and Robyn continues trying to regain control of the narrative, saying that she never intended to create imbalance, that she believed the family was still functioning as a unit, but her words feel less certain now, less grounded, as if even she can hear the gaps in what she's saying, and the moment someone starts trying to explain too much, it often means the truth is slipping through the cracks, and the lawyer changes direction slightly, asking about the emotional dynamics of the family, about relationships, about whether Robyn was aware of the growing distance between Kody and the other wives, and this question hits differently, because it's not about numbers or documents. It's about awareness, about responsibility in a different form, and Robyn's expression softens again. Her voice quieter as she admits that she knew things weren't perfect, that she could see the tension, but she insists that she tried to encourage communication, to support the idea of unity, and for a moment there's a hint of sincerity that's hard to ignore. Because it feels real, like she's holding on to the version of events she wants to believe, but then comes the question that shifts everything again. Did you ever feel that your relationship with Kody was different from the others? And this time, the pause is longer, heavier, because there's no easy way to answer it without confirming what everyone already suspects, and when she finally speaks, her voice is almost a whisper. Every relationship is different, and it's not a denial, it's not a confirmation, it's something in between, and that ambiguity only adds to the tension because it leaves too much room for interpretation. And Christine lets out a quiet breath, almost like a silent reaction to hearing something she's known all along but never heard acknowledged, and Janelle's expression doesn't change, but her eyes narrow slightly, as if noting another piece of the puzzle falling into place, and Kody looks away now, no longer watching Robyn, his focus shifting to the table in front of him, as if avoiding the weight of what's being revealed, because sometimes the hardest truths aren't the ones spoken directly, but the ones implied in what's left unsaid, and the lawyer steps closer, his tone sharper now, asking Robyn if she believes the family structure was still equal at the time these decisions were being made. And this question lands like a final test, something that demands a clear answer. And Robyn struggles with it, her composure visibly cracking now, her voice shaking slightly as she tries to respond, saying that she believed in the principle of equality, that she wanted it to work, but her words trail off, incomplete, because belief and reality are not the same thing. And everyone in the room can feel that distinction, and the silence that follows is almost unbearable, because it's filled with everything that hasn't been fully said yet, and then, unexpectedly, Kody speaks, his voice cutting through the tension, not loud, but sharp enough to shift the entire atmosphere. She's not responsible for this, and the courtroom reacts immediately, the judge calling for order, reminding him to remain silent, but the damage, or perhaps the revelation, is already done. Because that one statement changes the focus again, it redirects attention, not away from Robyn, but toward Kody himself, and Robyn looks at him, her expression a mix of relief and fear, because his intervention may have been meant to protect her, but it also draws more attention to the very thing they're trying to control, and Janelle watches this exchange carefully, her expression unreadable but clearly engaged, as if recognizing that something important just shifted, and Christine's gaze hardens, her posture straightening slightly, because this moment confirms something she's felt for a long time, that the dynamics were never as balanced as they were supposed to be. And the judge restores order, instructing Robyn to continue, but the energy in the room is no longer the same. It's sharper now, more focused, more intense, because the lines are becoming clearer, the roles more defined, and Robyn, now visibly shaken, tries to continue her testimony, but her voice lacks the steadiness it had before, her answers shorter, less certain, as if the weight of everything is finally catching up to her, and as she finishes, there's no sense of resolution, no feeling that her side has been fully established, only a lingering uncertainty, a sense that the truth is still incomplete, still unfolding, and as she steps down from the stand, avoiding eye contact with almost everyone, one thing becomes painfully clear. The story isn't just about what happened, it's about who takes responsibility for it, and who refuses to, and when responsibility starts shifting instead. Of settling, that's when the real conflict begins, and just as it seems like the courtroom might pause again, might take a breath before the next phase, the judge looks down at the notes, then back up and announces the next step, one that sends a ripple of tension through every person in the room. The court will now call Kody Brown to the stand, and in that moment, everything changes, because now the man at the center of it all can no longer sit in silence, and the question hanging in the air is no longer what happened, but whether he's ready to face it. The courtroom settles into a silence that feels different from before, not the tense anticipation of something about to explode, but the heavy stillness that comes after everything has already been said, like the truth has finally taken its place in the center of the room and no one can move around it anymore, and the judge looks down at the file for a long moment, flipping through pages filled with testimony, documents, statements that each carry pieces of a story that was once hidden behind smiles and shared appearances, and now sits exposed in its rawest form. And when the judge finally looks up, every person in the room instinctively straightens, as if bracing for impact. Because this is the moment where everything, every word, every silence, every reaction begins to matter in a different way. And the judge's voice is calm, measured, not emotional, but firm enough to carry the weight of what's about to be decided. And instead of delivering an immediate ruling, the judge begins by summarizing, revisiting the testimonies one by one, starting with Christine, acknowledging her claims of emotional neglect and control, then moving to Janelle, highlighting the financial inconsistencies and lack of transparency, and then to Robyn, noting her statements of limited awareness and intention, and finally to Kody, recognizing his defense, his justification, and his refusal to fully accept responsibility, and as each name is mentioned, each person reacts in subtle ways. Christine remains still but focused. Janelle watches with quiet intensity. Robyn's expression tightens with every passing sentence, and Kody sits rigid, his face set, but his eyes betraying a flicker of uncertainty. Because hearing your story told back to you in a courtroom has a way of making the truth feel impossible to escape, and the judge pauses briefly, allowing the weight of that summary to settle, before continuing, explaining that this case is not just about legal definitions or financial records, but about a structure, a system, a family dynamic that blurred the lines between personal relationships and shared responsibilities, and that in such a structure, clarity and fairness are not optional, they are essential, and the absence of those elements leads to exactly what has unfolded here. And those words land heavily, because they don't just describe the situation, they define it, and Kody shifts slightly in his seat as if feeling the pressure of that definition closing in, while Robyn looks down, her hands still tightly clasped, and Christine's expression softens just slightly. Not in relief, but in recognition, as if hearing something she's known for a long time finally being validated in a space where it can't be dismissed, and Janelle remains composed, but there's a subtle change in her posture. a quiet sense of resolution beginning to take shape, because when the truth is finally acknowledged, even partially, it changes how. Everything feels moving forward, and the judge continues, now addressing the financial aspect more directly, stating that the evidence presented suggests a clear imbalance in how resources were allocated and decisions were communicated, and that while intent may be debated, the impact is evident. And that distinction once again becomes the center of everything, because it shifts the focus away from what Kody claims he meant and anchors it firmly in what actually happened, and Kody's expression tightens further, his jaw clenching as if holding back a response he knows he can't give. And the judge then turns to the question of accountability, explaining that in any shared structure, especially one involving multiple households and intertwined finances, responsibility cannot be selectively accepted. It must be fully acknowledged. And that failure to do so not only damages trust, but ultimately leads to the breakdown of the entire system. And those words feel less like a legal statement and more like a conclusion to everything that's been building since the beginning. And for a moment, the courtroom feels almost still, as if everyone is absorbing the final shape of the story they've been part of, and then the judge leans forward slightly, signaling that the moment everyone has been waiting for is finally here. The ruling, the outcome, the decision that will turn all of this into something concrete, something final, and the air seems to tighten again, not with anticipation this time, but with the weight of inevitability, and the judge begins outlining the decision in clear, precise terms, addressing the financial disputes, the distribution of assets, the responsibilities moving forward, and while the specifics are detailed, what matters most is the underlying message that the structure as it existed is no longer sustainable, that the imbalance cannot continue, and that changes must be made, and as those words unfold, each person in the room reacts in their own way. Christine exhales slowly, a release that feels long overdue. Janelle nods. Almost imperceptibly, as if confirming something she already accepted, Robyn's composure falters just slightly, her eyes glistening as the reality of the situation settles in, and Kody remains still, but there's a shift in him. Something quieter, less defensive, more reflective, as if the finality of the decision has reached a place that argument no longer can, because when a decision is no longer yours to control, you're left with nothing but the truth of it, and the judge concludes the ruling, the final words echoing in the room as a definitive end to the legal battle, but not necessarily to the emotional one, and as the gavel falls, the sound cuts through the silence like a line being drawn between what was and what is now, and for a moment, no one moves, as if the weight of that sound has pinned them in place, and then slowly, almost reluctantly, the room begins to shift back into motion. Chairs scrape softly against the floor, papers are gathered, people stand, but the energy is different now. Less chaotic, more settled, as if something that's been building for years has finally reached its breaking point and moved past it, and Christine is the first to step away, not looking back, her posture steady, her pace unhurried but purposeful, like someone who knows exactly where she's going next, and Janelle follows shortly after, pausing only briefly to collect her things before walking out with the same quiet strength she carried throughout the entire process, and Mary lingers for a moment longer, her expression distant, as if caught between what was and what could have been, before eventually turning and leaving as well, and Robyn remains seated for a few seconds after everyone else begins to move, her gaze fixed on the table in front of her, as if trying to process everything that just happened, and when she finally stands, there's a hesitation in her movement, a fragility that wasn't as visible before, and she glances toward Kody, searching for something. Support, reassurance, maybe even an answer, but what she finds is different, Because Kody is no longer looking at her, he's staring ahead, lost in thought, his expression unreadable but undeniably changed, and that moment between them says more than anything spoken in the courtroom, because it reveals a shift, not just in the situation, but in the connection itself. Because sometimes the real ending isn't in the decision, it's in how people look at each other after it's made. And Kody eventually stands, slower than before, his movements heavier, as if the weight he's carrying now is different from the one he walked in with. And as he turns to leave, he pauses for just a second, his gaze drifting toward the empty seats where Christine and Janelle once sat. And there's something in that glance, something that looks like realization, or maybe regret, or maybe just the understanding that some things, once broken, don't return to what they were. And then he walks out, not with the confidence he entered with, but with a quieter, more uncertain presence, and as the courtroom empties, the space itself feels different, like it's holding on to the echoes of everything that was said, everything that changed, and everything that can't be undone. And the story that began as a family dynamic has now become something else entirely. Something defined by choices, consequences, and the truths that were finally brought into the light. And when everything is finally exposed, the only question that remains is what comes next. And as the doors close and the scene fades, that question lingers not just for them, but for anyone watching, anyone listening, anyone trying to understand where the line between love, control, and responsibility was truly drawn, and maybe more importantly, whether it could have ever been different.